The fall of the Romanov dynasty was preceded by a long series of attacks promoted by organizations which, despite heavy blows from repression, always managed to reconstitute themselves. In Trotsky's opinion, a similar process was unfolding in the USSR in response to the betrayal consummated by the bureaucracy. What threatens it aren't individual acts of terrorism, but precursors of another great revolution. All indications lead us to believe that events are headed toward a conflict between the popular forces, motivated by cultural promotion, and the bureaucratic oligarchy. This crisis doesn't allow for a peaceful solution. The country is clearly headed toward a revolution. 223 A decisive civil war appears on the horizon and, in the atmosphere of civil war, the assassination of some oppressors is no longer a matter of individual terrorism. In any case, the Fourth International supports a struggle to the death against Stalinism, destined to eliminate a faction already condemned by history. 224 As you can see, the attack against Kirov evokes the specter of civil war among the forces that had toppled the old regime. In reality, this specter follows the history of Soviet Russia like a shadow from the moment it is established. To sabotage the Peace of Brest-Litovsk, interpreted by Bukharin as a capitulation to German imperialism and a betrayal of proletarian internationalism, he harbors for a moment the idea of a type of coup d'état that would see removed from power, at least for some time, the man who was until that moment the undisputed leader of the Bolsheviks. If it was already out in the open while Lenin was still alive, despite his enormous prestige as a leader, the specter of the division of the Bolshevik leadership group, and of civil war within that same revolutionary bloc, took complete form in the following years. It's what unequivocally appears in the important testimony from within the anti-Stalinist opposition and from the deserters of the communist movement, in whom the old faith had transformed into unrelenting hatred. Let's see how Boris Souvarine describes the situation created in the CPSU around 10 years after the October Revolution. The opposition considers forming its own organization as a clandestine party within the one party, with its miniature hierarchy, its Politburo, its central committee, its regional and local agents, its groups on the ground, its participation quotas, its memos, and its code for correspondence. 225 The expectations were not just for a political clash, but a military one as well. Immediately after the end of the Second World War, the memoirs of Ruth Fischer are published in the United States, at the time a leading figure within the German Communist movement and member of the Presidium of the Comintern from 1922 to 1924. In this memoir she explains the way in which, in her time, she participated in the resistance organization in the USSR against the totalitarian regime that had been installed in Moscow. This is in 1926. After breaking with Stalin the year before, Zinoviev and Kamenev drew close to Trotsky. They organized the bloc to win power. They then develop a clandestine network that reaches as far as Vladivostok in the Far East. Messengers distribute classified party and state documents, transmit coded messages, armed guards provide security to secret meetings. The leaders of the bloc made preparations for definitive steps, based on the assumption that the clash with Stalin could only be resolved with violence. They met at a forest in the outskirts of Moscow with the aim of analyzing in depth the military aspect of their program, starting with the role of those army units willing to support the coup d'état. Fischer continues, "It was a question that was mostly technical, which should be discussed between the two military leaders, Trotsky and Lashevich. Since as vice commissar of the Red Army he was still in a favorable legal position, Lashevich was tasked with planning the military action against Stalin." 226 The street demonstrations the following year, to mark the 10th anniversary of the October Revolution, should be read in that context. From Moscow and Leningrad they extended to other industrial centers so as to force the party hierarchy to give in. 227 In Europe during those years, it wasn't a mystery to anyone the severity of the political battle that went on in Soviet Russia. The history of the struggle between Stalin and Trotsky is the history of the attempt by Trotsky to take power, it is the history of a failed coup d'état. The brilliant organizer of the Red Army, still enjoying immense popularity, certainly didn't accept defeat. His violent polemic and cynical and foolhardy pride made him a type of Red Bonaparte backed by the army, the popular masses, and by the rebellious spirit of the young communists against the old Leninist guard and the high clergy of the party. Yes, the high tide of sedition advances upon the Kremlin. 228 The author, Curcio Malaparte, who was in Moscow and had interviewed figures at the highest level, gives a reading of the tensions of 1927 which is confirmed by Ruth Fischer, that's to say, by an authorized representative of the anti-Stalinist opposition. Quote, on the eve of the celebration of the 10th anniversary of the Russian Revolution, the imprisonment of Trotsky would provoke an unpleasant reaction. The occasion chosen by Trotsky to seize state power couldn't be any better. Like the good tactician he is, he stayed in the shadows. To not appear as a tyrant, Stalin wouldn't dare arrest him. When he would dare to, it would be too late, thought Trotsky. By the time the lights would go off on the 10th anniversary of the revolution, Stalin would no longer be in power. 229 As is already known, these plans fail and Trotsky, expelled from the party, sees himself obligated to transfer first to Alma-Ata and later to Turkey. There the Soviet consulate authorities pay him $1,500 for royalties as an author. 230 Although it's a ridiculous quantity, as affirmed by a supporter, historian, and biographer of Trotsky, 231 the gesture could be read as an attempt to not sharpen the contradiction any further.